Good afternoon. Welcome to EduSet Network. Friend, as you are aware, today we are going to discuss the Queens of Mahabharat. But this is a vast topic. We will not cover the entirely, but just introductory in nature. And for discussion on this very topic, we have in a studio an eminent scholar, Dr. Kavita Sharma. She is an able administrator and true academician, and presently working as director of India International Center. And before joining this institution, she has been working as a principal of prestigious Hindu college. And as you all aware that she has left her imprint in a different way, either in the academic field or in the administrative fields. But in all these, her academic interest is intact. That's why she writes a number of books and written a number of articles for different journals, national, international. Also writes in newspaper and spare time for delivering such a lectures. So it's a great pleasure for all of us having her here for EduSet lecture on this very topic. So on your behalf, I welcome Dr. Sharma for EduSet lecture.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and today we'll talk about the Queens of Mahabharat. Now, at the outset, one would think of Mahabharat, and that is the way it is usually read, as a fratricidal war between two branches of the Kuru family for the throne of Hastinapur. But actually it can also be seen as the story of very powerful women who assert themselves in a patriarchal society. They are intelligent, they are very accomplished, they are learned, they are well versed in statecraft, they are beautiful, and when required, they are very subversive, manipulative, and even ruthless. Actually, it is the men who seem to be indecisive. They flounder at crucial moments, and their courage has to be shored up by many of these women. Of course, the most assertive, I would say, are Kunti and Draupadi, but Satyavati's contribution to the war is not negligible. Satyavati is the daughter of a fisherman, and it is Rishi Parashar, as we know, who falls in love with her, and the result of the union is Krishna Dvaipayan or Vyas, and it is Vyas whose children, Dhritarashtra and Pandu, and of course Vidur, but Dhritarashtra and Pandu are in the fratricidal war. It also leads to Devvrat, who later gets known to be Bhishma, his promise not to marry again and not to marry and not to have any claim to the throne of Hastinapur. It is ironical because when Vichitravirya and Chitrangad pass away, it is their wives, widows, who have not had any children, and Satyavati has to actually ask Bhishma to do the niyog on them, but he refuses, reminding her of his promise to her. And therefore, it is Vyas who has to come and perform this niyog. Gandhari too plays a significant role in Mahabharat, and while she does not succeed in changing the course of the war, but she asserts forcefully whenever she is required to do so and at very crucial moments. And we have to remember that it is finally her curse that leads to the destruction of the Vrishnis and the ignominious death of Krishna himself. Other women too play very significant roles. For example, after the war is over and Yudhishthir is crowned king, he performs the Ashwamedh Yagya. After the Yagya, Vyas commands Arjun to follow the horse, the sacrificial horse, to various places, while Bhim stays back to defend the kingdom. Among the various places that he goes to, one of them is the country of the Sendhavas, the kingdom of Jayadratha, who has been killed in the war. His wife, or now widow, is Dushala, who is the sister of Duryodhan and therefore in a way also the sister of Yudhishthir and the Pandavas. When Arjun goes to the Sendhava kingdom, at first he is offered great resistance. But the unfortunate thing is that Jayadratha's son Surat has already died out of the grief for one more impending um, war that is confronting him. Finally, when the battle goes on, Dushala comes with the infant child of Jayadratha, with the infant child of Surat. And then she reminds Arjun that this child is also his grandson and therefore is no different from Parikshit, and it is time to call the family hostilities to an end. Arjun also goes to Gandhar and fights Shakuni's son there, but it is his mother who finally meets Arjun on the battlefield with all the aged ministers, and she asks that battle must cease, hostilities must cease, enough bloodshed has already taken place. The men in Mahabharat think they can control women, think they can bind them into moral codes, think they can terrorize them into submission. They can threaten them with dire consequences. They evolve penalties for transgression of the codes. Who have made these codes? Obviously, it is the men themselves who have made these codes. But women know how to operate in a male dominated world, how to subvert this male hegemony, how to invert the de jure power, make space for themselves, and convert it into a de facto power in their own hands. You see this happening with Kunti and Draupadi on several occasions when they compel the men to take crucial decisions at critical times. But of course, the problem is that these women have to work largely through their husbands and sons. And that is why the pressure to produce sons and the pressure to produce the first son, and that is what leads to rivalry. These women can never forge a bond of solidarity among themselves or of friendship. And that is why Gandhari and Kunti are rivals, Kunti and Madri are rivals. This rivalry between Kunti and Madri is seen at the time of Niyog. It is through Kunti's mantra that Madri calls upon the Ashwin twins and has two sons. So when Pandu asks Kunti to allow Madri to conceive once again, she says no. Because Kunti has three sons. Madri has already produced two sons. If Madri again, as Kunti sees it, cheats her and produces another two sons, then her sons would outnumber Kunti's sons. And again, Gandhari has been given a boon by Vyas that she would be the mother of 100 sons. But she knows that this boon is hollow if she does not produce the first son, because really this whole race is towards the throne of Hastinapur. And that is why when she hears of the birth of Yudhishthir, she is very upset and very angry because she has been carrying her pregnancy for 2 years without any result. So she hits herself on her stomach and she aborts. It is then that Vyas rushes and the fetus is divided first into 100 parts, but then Gandhari also desires a daughter. So then the remnants are put together and that is what is Dushala. So she becomes the mother of 100 sons and one daughter. Now, this business of being responsible for producing the heirs to the throne in an odd way gives these women immense power as wives and mothers, because after all, only they can reproduce. And therefore, it becomes a part of the power structure both in the public sphere and in the private sphere. And these power structures then become ambiguous. With fluid boundaries, it also leads to a great fear of women and their sexuality and the power that sexuality gives to these women over men. Now, Draupadi is a totally different case because she is different from other Kuru women. She does not derive her power from any man. She is a woman in her own right, the only independent woman. She is also an enigma because she's born as an adult. She doesn't have a childhood. She's born from a ritual fire. And she is supposed to be she is destined to be the cause of the destruction of thousands of Kshatriyas, according to the prophecy at her birth. Why are these Kshatriyas to be destroyed? Possibly because they become very arrogant and therefore very exploitative, very cruel, and therefore their destruction has to take place. She is married to 5 Pandavas, men with equal strength, and she herself, being an independent woman, she challenges the patriarchal norms. This is seen also in a reversal of roles. It is Draupadi who protects her husbands and not the other way around. This is seen during the game of dice, because her 5 husbands just sit there with their heads bowed and do not rise to protect her. It is she who sustains and strengthens them. After the disrobing incident, Dhritarashtra realizes things have gone too far and this would not bode well for him or for his kingdom. And therefore, he asks her, he says, you can take any boons that you want. She takes 2. She wants the freedom of her husbands and she wants all their weapons and restored to them. When he says take the 3rd boon also, she says no. Because once she has her husbands free with their arms, they can always win back the rest of it. But Dhritarashtra insists upon returning the kingdom with all the wealth that has been won through the game of dice. But actually, this game of dice has been a symbolic one. It is really the stakes, whatever may have been the overt stakes, the real stake is the throne of Hastinapur. And this comes through because when the Pandavas leave with Draupadi, there is great consternation in the court, and Duryodhan wants a recall because now there will be no more games. There will be only a replay of the game of dice with only one bet for the throne of Hastinapur. Whoever wins that game will rule. Whoever loses will go to the forest for 13 years, and the last year he will have to live, they will have to live, or he will have to live incognito, and if they are found out, then that whole process will start again. So it is actually, in effect, a banishment of the loser. And therefore, even Karn at this time is filled with respect for Draupadi. And he actually taunts the Pandavas and says that they have got everything back after the first game of dice through their wife Draupadi. It is because Draupadi is so strong that she is worshipped as Shakti. In several temples are devoted to her, especially in the southern part, in the state of Tamil Nadu. She is known as Draupadi Amma, and I went to Reunion Island and I was very surprised to see so many temples devoted to Draupadi in the sugar plantations there. One reason is because a lot of indentured labor for these plantations went from the southern part of India, largely from the present state of Tamil Nadu, and therefore now when they are owners of this plantation, they have a temple to Draupadi there. Draupadi, being worshipped as power, as Shakti, is also associated with the cult of fire walking, which is widespread in Sri Lanka, Singapore, Malaysia, Reunion Island, Fiji, and other places. She is the guiding person, guiding spirit who leads the Pandavas to war, and that is why fire walking. But we must not get the idea that these women have it easy or that they have an independent status of their own. Because when you evaluate their situation, we can't say that simply because they enjoy authority, which they have created for themselves, or because they are worshipped as deities, or because they have respected roles as mothers, wives, sisters, or daughters, that they are always respected in real life. Because this is really a derived respect. It is not to treat an individual as an individual, but the respect and authority is derived from the position of the father, brother, son, or husband. Mahabharata itself distinguishes between respect for one's own self and respect because of socially given identities. This we see in the case of women like Shandili or in the case of Sulbha. Now, Garud, flying with Gaval Rishi, um, alights on Mount Rishab. There, the two of them are greeted by an ascetic woman, Shandili, who treats them with great respect as an honor as guests. But in the morning, when they get up, Garud finds that all his feathers have fallen off and he has been reduced to just a small ball of flesh. And Gaval Rishi asks him, "Why? What happened to you? What sinful thoughts did you have?" And he says, "None. I only thought that Chandali is living here alone, and maybe they should take her to Mount Kailash where Shiva resides, or take her to Vishnu, so that she is not alone." But then Chandali tells him that she has no wish to go anywhere. She has earned what she has earned, all her ascetic merit, all by herself. So why should she wish to go anywhere at all? And she warns Garud never to have such thoughts again about a woman. Sulbha, another ascetic woman, she comes to the court of King Janak, the great king of Mithila, who claims that he is a Jivan Mukta, although he is the king of Mithila. His claim is that although he rules as a king, he has given up all attachment. But then she defeats him. She defeats him with her knowledge, with her learning, and with her arguments. Because she says that these two positions are really contradictory. You cannot remain the king and yet be completely detached. Now you can argue and say that Chandali and Sulbha are women outside the mainstream of society. So, of course, it leads to the question, does a woman have to renounce marriage and family and adopt the lonely ascetic path in order to be respected in her own right? Are single women then an embarrassment? Are they supposed to have, because they are single, unbridled sexuality, and therefore do they pose a threat to the order and discipline of society? Therefore, the question is, how do you overcome this threat? And does society then feel the need to contain them, institutionalize them, and regulate them? Well, there are other women who are not single but who are outside the pale of this derived power, and they are other queens like Hidimba, Chitrangada, Ulupi. In South India, you have Ali and Monlial, who then later become the wives of Arjun. All these women are autonomous, they are not dependent on any man for their position or for protection. But as we see Mahabharat in the way it stands now, the narrative really attempts to bring them back into the patriarchal norms, and therefore you find the subjugation of queens like Ali. However, regional narratives remain, and while parts of them get incorporated into the what we know as Vyasa's Mahabharat, but they also remain as standalone narratives in different regions. They have different value systems, and therefore their transformations actually provide great insight into the different value systems and the attempt to absorb them into this patriarchal mold. But each of these enrich the core narrative, and it is through them that you have a constant reinterpretation of the value systems and motivations of the characters of Mahabharat. And that is where lies the eternal appeal of Mahabharat, that every age, every generation, every individual interprets Mahabharat according to his or her own needs and contemporary situations. But In spite of all the assimilative practices that go on or processes that go on, some of these women, in spite of the passage of time, remain outside the patriarchal mainstream. Others become a part of it. Others, there are still others who incorporate both the matriarchal and the patriarchal. For example, Madri. But Hidimba, you can argue, is a Rakshasi and therefore outside the patriarchal Aryan fold. You can argue that somebody like Urvashi, who is so powerful that she can curse Arjun, she is an Apsara. Now, the story of Urvashi is very interesting because she is an Apsara in the court of Indra. And she falls in love with Arjun while he visits Indra and approaches him. Arjun says, "No, because you are the beloved of my father, and therefore you are like my mother, and therefore I cannot have this relationship with you." She says, "No, Apsaras are outside these traditional norms, and if the only rule that they follow is that when a woman approaches a man, he is bound to satisfy her. And since Arjun fails to do that, she curses him that he will become a eunuch. When Arjun complains or appeals to Indra, he says he has no power to completely overturn Urvashi's curse, but that this period would be reduced to 1 year, and that is the 13th year that Arjun spends finally as Brihanala in the court of King Virat. Now, Mahabharata therefore recognizes the power of women, but it is also then put in conjunction with state power. And what are the structures in society required to preserve state power? And that is why Yudhishthir asks this, to me, initially a very strange sounding question. When Bhishma is lying on his bed of arrows, he says, "How do I deal with women?" Now, obviously, perhaps not quite the right person to ask, because Bhishma's own life has been ruined because of women, and therefore he doesn't quite know how to answer, and so he answers indirectly by referring to Panchachura, who is a courtesan, who is a dancer, and Panchachura says women are the way to all evil. They have unbridled sexual appetite, which is never satiated. They will go on approaching a man whether he is an invalid, whether he is willing or not willing. Now, why does Bhishma do this? Perhaps this question brings him face to face with his pent up anger and frustrations. One word given to a woman, Satyavati, has ruined his life. Because it is his father, Shantanu, who got besotted with Satyavati, and whose condition, therefore, of marrying Shantanu was that it is her children who would be the kings and not Bhishma's children. Now, therefore, what Mahabharata is really saying is that the best of men, like Shantanu also, and the mightiest of them become victims of female sexuality. But then, if it is such a power, it can be put to great use if it is subordinated. And therefore, Mahabharata divides women into two classes: the utterly destructive, who have unbridled sexuality, and the chaste wives and mothers. Within these polarities, you have the ambiguities of niyog or levirate relationship, polyandry, woman's freedom to take initiative for a man, swayamvar, ambivalences of marriage, ambivalences of her relationship with her husband's brother. Now, many of these can also be read sociologically as part of changing social structures at different times, because after all, Mahabharata as we know it today took about 1,000 years in making. Also, it embodies variations of caste, class, region. So, on the one hand, it is legitimate to abduct a woman forcefully, as for example, Arjun abducts Subhadra with the active connivance of Krishna. But at the same time, a woman can refuse a suitor in the open court, as Draupadi refuses Karn. At the same time, it raises the question, is Swayamvar actually a Swayamvar? Because she is bound by a condition laid by her father and her brother. Now, Bhishma, seeing what happened to him, says women just cannot be restrained. And then he goes on to cite Rishi Dev Sharman's words to his disciple Vipul. Rishi says, there are two classes of women, virtuous and not virtuous. It is the virtuous women who uphold the earth, its waters, its forests, and they need to be protected and cherished. The not virtuous women, the women who are not so virtuous, have so much sexuality that they can destroy the entire race. And therefore, they have to be restrained and protected, but which is something which is always a struggle. Now, Bhishma then goes on to say, women at one time were as chaste as men, and so they kept ascending in purity, in the orders of purity, till they reached the status of deities. This caused great alarm among the gods, and they went to Brahma. And they said that something needs to be done because they did not want to lose their superior hierarchical position in this whole creation. Therefore, Brahma, who agreed with them, created women through Atharvan rites, and that is what caused the distinction between chaste and unchaste. In his new creation, he implanted desire, lust, enjoyment of carnal pleasures right at the beginning, at the time of creation itself. Therefore, these women who were created out of illusion, which is what these Atharvan rites did, were sinful. The others remained chaste. Then Brahma went on to create wrath, the companion of lust, and men, yielding to the power of both wrath and lust, desired women intemperately, causing a lot of evil in the world. Now, therefore, if you see it from the patriarchal point of view, the mightiest of men feel threatened and manipulated because of their sexual desire, and therefore they attempt to regulate women's sexuality, which they term as chastity. Therefore, chastity, as we see in Mahabharata, is not really fidelity to one man at all. It is that man regulating your relationship or the woman's relationship with other men. But why is Bhishma such a misogynist? Well, it's not just Satyavati who causes his misogyny, but also his own mother, Ganga, because Ganga leaves him, abandons him to the father, and returns. And therefore, he never gets the love of a woman, whether it is through a mother or through a wife or a female companion. This, I think, over the years makes him very dysfunctional. And that is why he remains a mere spectator when Draupadi is disrobed in the open court of Dhritarashtra. When she appeals to him, he can only say, and that too very ineffectually, that dharma is subtle and confusing, and therefore he can do nothing. But then for him, the way he is practicing dharma, it becomes really an empty shell. It becomes a mirror of his own moral confusions, which are both manifest in the public domains and in the private domains. In the public domain, he has given up the throne of Hastinapur, but remains firmly attached to it, because he is the virtual ruler when Vichitravir and Chitrangad are ruling. After their early deaths, he rules through first Pandu and then Dhritarashtra. And that is what makes him tolerate all the machinations of Duryodhan. Even as children growing up, Duryodhan tries to eliminate the Pandavas through drowning, poisoning, burning. Again, it's an amazing paradox. He fights on the wrong side. He knows that the truth lies with the Pandavas, that the moral lies, ethics lies with the Pandavas, but he not only fights for Duryodhan, but chooses to become his chief commander. It is an extremely immoral stance, and that is why perhaps psychologically that the bed of arrows is really a psychological metaphor. He has to resolve his moral confusions before he can actually attain salvation. Now, Amazingly cynically, again mirroring his own moral confusion, when Draupadi insistently appeals to him, he says, Dharma lies with the strong. And even if a weak person is ethically correct, no one listens to him. Now, when Bhishma talks of patriarchal structures, he shows how the patriarchal and hierarchical structure operates both in the public and in the private domains. Now, how did this come about? When Parshuram, the son of Rishi Jamadagni, destroyed the Kshatriya clan, then what happened? The Kshatriya women came to the Brahmins, and thus a new race was born. Now, in symbolic terms, what would that mean? There is obviously a conflict between the Kshatriyas and the Brahmins. The Brahmins, they are the people who give counsel, who are the wise um, sages according to which the Kshatriya ruler must rule. But then they do not own anything, they don't possess anything. And the real economic, political, and military might lies with the Kshatriya king. So obviously there is a conflict going on here. And this conflict comes together in a person like Drona, who is the reverse. He is a Brahmin turned into a Kshatriya. And therefore, what does he want as Guru Dakshina? He wants half the kingdom of Drupad, which he asks Arjun and the other Pandavas to get. And so these moral confusions become a transgressing of boundaries and roles and functions. Now, the chaste women, with their sexuality regulated by men, show how they can then become extremely manipulative. They are manipulative and they are manipulated in their turn. This comes through in the case of Kunti. There is a practice that whenever a rishi, a sage, a Brahmin visits a king, then the king then the king really looks after him, because in order to seek his blessings, seek favors from him, and especially the blessings of a son. And one of the ways in which he is looked after is that the daughter of the house is supposed to serve him with total dedication and give him whatever he asks for. And that is how Kunti is sent into the service of Durvasa Rishi by Kunti Bhoj, her adoptive father. Also, Pandu explains to Kunti, again ironically, it is Pandu who persuades Kunti to enter into levirate relationships or neog relationships, and he explains to Kunti that women at one time were free, but their freedom gradually got circumscribed by patriarchal norms, and this was done by Shvetketu, the son of Rishi Uddalak. Apparently, a guest came to Rishi Uddalak, who then wanted Uddalak's wife and Shvetketu's mother to spend the night with him. Shvetketu objected, although Rishi Uddalak said that this was the norm. But then he laid down rules and said that women would remain faithful to one man, and they would not bear children from any other man, even if the husband wanted them to do so. In turn, he enjoined upon the men to treat their chaste and loving wives with great care and affection. Now, why did they find it necessary to gradually circumscribe the freedom and control the sexuality? Probably because as society turned from nomadic to agriculture to land owning, property owning, and as the societal structures of state, kingship, etc. came into being, it became necessary to pass on this property to an inheritor, and therefore the much needed sons, and therefore the husband had to be sure that the son was his own if he wanted to give him this property. And therefore it became the primary duty of women that they obey their husbands. That marriage, since it was performed in front of a sacred fire, the woman must regard the husband as her deity, and her whole being should only be devoted to him. Parvati expounds the duties of a chaste wife, as also does Draupadi. Now, that is a little surprising because she is married to 5 men. But when they are in the forest, Krishna visits with Satyabhama, and she asks her, how does she keep a control over these 5 men? And how is it that they are so much in her power and they obey her? And so she says, do you actually practice some black magic, or is it because you're so beautiful? And she takes great offense, Draupadi, and she says, let me expound to you the duties of a chaste wife. And she says how she is the first to get up, how she is the last to go to bed, how she performs all her wifely duties, how she never talks to any man, including a young man who is old enough to be her son, or even to her sons, away from her husbands, and how she is completely devoted to them. And therefore, the question arises, does the wife then follow the husband blindly in whatever he says or does? But if you read Parvati carefully, she says the wife is a partner only in the righteous deeds of the husband. Now, that is really almost the same thing as the question asked by Draupadi at the game of dice. When she is wagered away by her husband, Yudhishthir, her question is, did he stake himself first or her first? Because this brings to the fore actually what is the extent actually of the husband's ownership of the wife. What is the status of a wife, and what are the husband's rights on her? Now, a slave cannot own anybody at all, so or own anything at all. So, does Yudhishthir, after being a slave, own Draupadi? And or does a slave have still retain rights over a wife? Now, the question is left unanswered, because if the answer is no, then of course Draupadi would just be left at the mercy of all the Kauravas. But then we find that not all the obligations are on the wife alone, because when a chaste wife devotes herself to her husband, but the husband does not look after her, what are the implications of that? The implications of that are seen in the actions of Rishi Gautam. Rishi Gautam suspects his wife of infidelity and wrongdoing, so he is very angry, and he tells his son Chirkari that he himself is going to the forest, but Chirkari should kill his mother. Now, Chirkari is in a dilemma whether to follow the duties of a son and obey his father, or whether to follow the duties of a son and protect the mother. Chirkari chooses to disobey his father. Why? Because he says it is his duty to protect his mother. And in so saying, he argues that a husband is supposed to be a provider and a protector. Now, if he does neither, he loses the privileges of being a husband. After a while, Gautam realizes his mistake and hurries back to try and save his wife. He is very happy to find that his son has disobeyed him, and it teaches him a lesson that in worldly matters, it is not right to make decisions in haste or in anger. Similarly, we see it in the relationship of Rishi Dirghatamas and his wife Pradveshi. Dirghatamas goes to too many niyogs and beyond the limit that he can actually do, and that is why the other rishis and munis have cast him off. They have boycotted him. Pradveshi also decides that she will not keep him and that she is unable to serve him, so she asks her sons to throw him out of the house. Now, why does she say that? She says a husband must support his wife. And since Pradveshi, since Dirk Tamas has failed to support Pradveshi, she feels under no obligation to keep him and support him. She also goes on to say that a husband is called a pati, which means a protector. Since Dirk Tamas can neither protect nor provide for her, therefore she is under no obligation to look after him. Therefore, we see that Mahabharata really has a whole gallery of women. Their words and actions are often the driving force behind the men. They constantly intervene, manipulate, subjugate, and subvert men. They exercise power over them. They also make space for themselves and become the pivots around which decision making takes place. And therefore, these beautiful, intelligent, brave women cannot really be easily beaten into submission or subdued. Thank you.
Well, I have described the various women and their relationship with others, but the what we wonder how the this message went across to the masses, and what the moral they derive from these things, and how it could be communicated at that time, because it was not a modern sort of the things of communicating the facts.
See, Mahabharata is actually oral history, and therefore, obviously, the written word came much later and it was recited, and therefore, it obviously went to the masses. But as I think the patriarchal norms and the society settled down, that is why it is said, I'm sure you know that you should never keep Mahabharata in your house,
Right.
and that you should never read the Mahabharata
Right.
because it causes dissensions in the house.
Right.
And people have interpreted it to mean that it causes dissensions because it's the story of war between two branches of the Guru family, and they are brothers and they're really fighting for material wealth. I think it also causes dissensions because many of your illusions fall away.
Right.
And you realize that everybody works for their self interest, that everybody is after power, after wealth, after position, after social status. And these desires are couched in ethical terms, moral terms, but they are really desires for dominance, and all actions take place from there. So I'm sure the masses, when in oral history, subversion is one of the main things that happens. And so the masses, of course, knew it. But as we became what I call a more straight-jacketed and narrow society, we decided that the stability of society and of family is far more important than carrying this message home. And that is why I think Ramayana is more popular.
Yeah, more people. But see, Ramayana teaches us a sacrifice and welfare of others, not the self. The instances like that, we have fight there, but the moral of the things, all the stories say that no, you sacrifice.
That's right.
You think of the welfare of the people. But just contrary to this in the Mahabharats. So two great epics we have, and the people live side with both of them. We can't say one of them. Those who know about the Ramayana, they also know about the Mahabharata.
And vice versa, yeah.
Yeah, but still they go by the Ramayana. So
they're made to go. They've been. See, Ramayana is an idealized world. If you take it in terms of your yugas, Ramayana was written in the Treta Yuga.
yeah,
And Mahabharata, the yuga is changing from Dwapar to Kali Yuga. So the Ramayana is a more idealized version. This is what is your duty, and you must sacrifice for this and for your father, for your mother, for your wife, for your husband, for whatever,
right.
But what Mahabharata is really saying is a very realistic thing. Most people don't sacrifice for anything.
Yeah, that's why
They are saying that Mahabharata says everybody works in their self-interest.
right, and that is what we see. The human nature is.
Yeah.
The child go for the greed and display such kind of attitudes. But slowly, when we pass out the school, they are shaped like that.
Yeah. They're not even shaped like that. If you see society around us,
Yeah.
what do you see around you? A lot of self-interest, a lot of greed, a lot of corruption.
Right.
What is it all a fight for at the end of it? Power? Wealth? So Mahabharata is telling you that this is what happens. But when it becomes too much, then what happens? A war takes place. However, whether it's a fratricidal war or whether some destruction takes place. Because a society needs to balance the individual self interest with that of the community, with that of society. When only one person's self interest becomes predominant, whether it is Dhritarashtra, whether it is Duryodhana, or whether it is even the Pandus, because if you analyze politically Mahabharata,
So,
even Yudhishthir doesn't really have a unmitigated or a clear claim to the throne.
so in a fried term, we can say the Mahabharata is you say, a story of id, and Ramayana is a story of superego. An ego balances.
Well, you can say that, but the message of Mahabharata is not that of the Eid, if you want to use Freudian terms.
Yeah.
What is the message of Mahabharata? The message of Mahabharata is that a truth
Yeah.
which needs so much destruction to get established is not a truth at all. Another message of Mahabharata is that the truth of weapons is not a truth forever, and that is why Arjun's Gandhi fails at the end of it all. At the end of it, Mahabharata, in spite of all the war that takes place, is not a song of war. It is the song of
in terms
peace.
in terms of presenting the reality.
Yeah. But it's a song of peace. The overarching, when you finish Mahabharata,
Yeah.
you're not disturbed.
Right.
At the end of it, the rasa that you are left with is shant, because it has taught you.
No, overall, we can interpret it like this way that, see, all the events which a human being can notice, can observe, is given here, and final outcome is this.
Yeah.
So why should waste our energy and our whatever we have in thinking of such kind of? So they are at peace because there is no alternative to find.
But it also tells you that you have to follow a balance between your desires and that of the community. It also what Vyas says at the end of it. I put up my hands and say that wealth and desire can be attained through dharma, but nobody listens to me.
Okay.
So unless we listen to that we can get wealth and fulfill our desires, even sexual desires, through righteousness or through the right path, Mahabharata is going to happen over and over and over again. That's what it tells you. I mean, even Ramayana for that matter, why did it happen? Because Kekai,
Yeah.
wanted power for her own son. Now, you can, as a scholar, you can sit and debate whether she was right or wrong. But the essential struggle is for the throne, isn't it?
Yeah. So finally, where we conclude that it's after all individual that take hold of all these, or it's a societal value which take hold of all this.
Both. Individuals create societal values and they are molded by societal values. See, there was a time when we were growing up when somebody who was rich but did not have the means, did a small job and salary, we all know what the salary he earned, and if he made a huge house, people would say that this person is immoral. Huh? And so there was a societal recognition that these are wrong things and you shouldn't do it. It's become the reverse today. They say you were sitting there and yet you didn't make it.
Yeah.
So you see, what is happening is that the individual and society are both coming together to actually do a wrong thing and approve it,
Okay.
while we preach the opposite.
Right. When we have come to here, so from here, how do you see the recent movement and the government state affairs which is taking a shape in the
I
country?
think a churning process is taking place. Now you can argue whether A is right or B is right, huh? But at least corruption, and not just monetary corruption, but even the integrity of processes, has come into the front page. It's been put on the consciousness of individuals, and we are all talking about it. That is our major concern.
Right.
10 years ago it wasn't. Even 5 years ago it wasn't.
Yeah. So the whole things.
So this is another Mahabharata in a way that is taking place.
Yeah,
The
that's
churning of society is taking
yeah,
place.
that's
And gradually people will realize that you do follow self-interest, but you have to follow enlightened self-interest.
yeah, the same thing as here. There was 5 villages. Here are you can say 5 laws or something are being demanded, not met.
Yeah, and not made.
Yeah.
So that is what I'm saying, that enlightened self-interest would mean that if I want my freedom, I must give you yours. I can't want my freedom and deny you your freedom. I can't spend 20 lakhs in one evening and not give you even 2000 rupees. You can't have poverty lines defined that way also, no?
Right. So here, do you think that epics or such story which will play a role in shaping the movement or shaping the whole things, like it when the freedom movement, when the religion came into the play, or the epics, you can say Gita or Mahabharat and Ramayana came into the play, the movement got intensified and people got together and together they fought for their own rights. So will such kind of thing is likely to come here again? Because right now only Gandhi has come into the
But Gandhi
fight.
used, what was
Yeah,
satyagrah,
yeah,
even
that is
ahimsa,
through him that will,
truth.
yeah, through him
Yeah,
that will come.
yeah. But I think what is also happening is that a religion and dharma are not synonymous, huh?
Yeah,
Dharma is a much vaster term. It is duty, it is a code of conduct, it is, how you perceive that you should live your life, and so on and so forth, at different stages of whatever you're doing. So not religion as such, but I think there is a value system that many of these epics and other texts embody. And this is what I was talking to you about. These are now, Mahabharata has not come to an end, as Ramayana has not come to an end.
right.
There are contemporary writers using these very stories as the underlying fundamental substratum to explore contemporary ideas, contemporary themes, situations, and talking about it. Because you see, this is a symbol, this is a myth. And what is the power of a symbol or a myth is that it doesn't die. It is
Right.
not this is equal to this. It is subject to further constant
Okay.
negotiation and
We will
interpretation.
have discussion on this, but we have a caller from Haryana. So let us take question from Haryana. Please ask your question. Please ask your question. I think some problems are there.
Yeah.
So, so this appearing that in coming days that things will more, these kind of the thing which has taken backseat will come into the forefront and play its
But
role.
they're already coming into the forefront. I
Yeah,
mean, something like yoga
yeah.
was, now it is on the forefront. In China, as you see the Chinese method of medicine, the acupressure, acupuncture, have become part of the syllabus of modern medicine also. Even with us, Ayurveda, yoga is again being discovered, rediscovered. Similarly, our stories, these are actually stories, right?
Yeah.
Whether you call them religious texts or no, that of course depends on how you're looking at them, but they're really stories. And actually, all life is a story. All creation is a story, and
So
all our stories are interlinked, no?
yeah, that is true. Then where the debate in academician that fundamentalist versus this sort of a thing which have been for last 4 decades have been dominating, where now they are likely to move.
Well, see,
Looking back is not good. This they are not
yeah,
progressive
but
sort
I
of the
don't know
things.
if anybody can actually, for a long time, not look back. Because I think a person without memory is a person without identity. It is like saying to you that don't look back on who is your father and who's your mother and who's your grandfather and what is your family.
Yeah.
Because you derive, whether good values or bad values or whatever values you derived, and your thinking processes, you derive it through a continuous collective
Conditioning.
unconscious.
Yeah.
They become a part of it. Nobody teaches you these. You just live with them. You just grow up with them,
Right.
isn't it?
So, in which form you think, as you cited the example of China, so they are the following such things since beginning. They never left it.
They did. The revolution in between, the cultural revolution was a break, right?
But not in the you can say to the extent what we find in
No,
our
we
setup.
didn't really break it either. In our music, in our dance,
Yeah.
in our theatre,
Yeah,
in
it's
our
there.
indigenous theatre, I mean, I hate calling it indigenous theatre. It is our theatre, but if you really want to use the current labels, in our folk narratives,
No, that
in
is,
our songs.
yeah, that is true, but
So this debate you're talking about is a very intellectual debate, which is of Western urbanized
yeah,
middle class.
yes,
But all of India has not given up on reciting their local epics or reciting. I mean,
yeah,
I went to
yeah, we can,
Bundelkhand and Ala Udal is still pretty much alive.
yeah.
You know?
So, or even in those who are against of it, they are practicing in their personal life, we can say.
Not only that, they use, again, they also use these symbols
Hmm.
in order to critique something.
Yeah, yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
So we have a caller from Haryana. Please ask your question.
जी यस सर, मैं इंडिया की गरीबी के बारे में पूछना चाहती हूँ कि कई लोग ऐसा मानते हैं कि गरीबी होना ज़रूरी है, क्योंकि ताकि जो लोग हैं वरना फिर काम नहीं करेंगे, जैसे जो हमें बुनियादी तौर पर काम की ज़रूरत पड़ती है वो काम नहीं करेंगे, सब अगर अमीर हो जाएंगे तो फिर निठल्ले हो जाएंगे। तो मैं इस बारे में पूछना चाहती हूँ कि क्या ये सही है?
आप कह रही हैं कि गरीबी ज़रूरी है क्योंकि अगर सबके पास पैसे हो जाएंगे तो लोग काम नहीं करेंगे। अगर ये आपका प्रश्न है तो मैं ये जानना चाहूँगी कि क्या अमीर लोगों ने काम करना छोड़ दिया है? वो तो और भी काम करते जाते हैं ताकि उनकी अमीरी बढ़ते जाए। तो मुझे नहीं लगता कि इस संदर्भ में गरीबी और अमीरी का सवाल है। लोग काम हाँ ज़रूर करते हैं रोज़ी रोटी कमाने के लिए, लेकिन अगर आपको रोज़ी रोटी आपको रोटी कपड़ा मकान मिल जाए तो आप काम करना छोड़ते नहीं हैं, क्योंकि इंसान की ये तो नेचर है कि वो कुछ ना कुछ तो करेगा ही, खाली ऐसे बैठ ही नहीं सकता। तो इसलिए आप काम तो ज़रूर ही करेंगे, लेकिन शायद थोड़ा बेटर सोशल जस्टिस से काम करेंगे। खाली इसलिए नहीं कि भाई हम अब के अगला खाना कहाँ से लाएं, उसके लिए काम नहीं करेंगे। आपको जो अच्छा लगता है, जो आपको समाज में अच्छा लगता है, जो आपको शोहरत देता है, जो आपको आगे बढ़ने की प्रेरणा देता है, वो काम करेंगे फिर।
दरअसल एक क्वेश्चन यहाँ से उठता है कि लोग समझता है कि जो काम हम कर रहे हैं केवल मजबूरी से कर रहे हैं, काम को छोटे और बड़े के नज़रिए से देखना शुरू कर दिया है। क्योंकि जबकि है निश्चित कि हर आदमी को अपना अपना इंटरेस्ट है। जिसको हम छोटा काम समझ रहे हैं उसको कितने लोग इंटरेस्ट से करते हैं, या जिसको हम बड़ा समझ रहे हैं उसको लोग इंटरेस्ट
कैसे
नहीं
करते हैं।
तो इस नज़रिया को चेंज करना
हाँ, और काम तो हर ज़रूरी होता है। अगर आप अपना घर चलाते हैं, कोई संस्था चलाते हैं, फिर उसको आगे बढ़ जाइए तो अपनी RWA चलाते हैं, उसमें हर कड़ी जो है वो ज़रूरी होती है। एक कड़ी भी बीच में कमज़ोर पड़ जाती है, टूट जाती है, तो वहाँ केओस हो जाता है, फिर आगे नहीं बढ़ता काम। तो इसलिए काम तो हर एक आदमी करेगा ही करेगा। बस ये है कि कितना मतलब एक ह्यूमन राइट्स भी होते हैं ना, क्योंकि उसको घर, उसको मेडिकल हेल्प, उसको एजुकेशन, उसको रोटी, उसको प्रॉपर लिविंग तो चाहिए ही चाहिए। और खाली इसी के लिए इंसान काम नहीं करता, वो आगे बढ़ने के लिए भी काम करता है।
तो लेकिन एक क्वेश्चन है, इसको हम लोग कह सकते हैं। क्वेश्चन तो बहुत अच्छा है, क्योंकि मेरी गरीबी का जो खाई बढ़ते जा रहा है, सो एक तरह से समाज में जो डिवीजन है उसको भी बढ़ा रहा है कहीं ना कहीं,
जरूर
सोच के स्तर पे।
हाँ।
तो एक
सोच के स्तर पे नहीं, ग्राउंड लेवल पे, रियलिटी में बढ़ा रहा है, तभी इतनी परेशानी है।
नहीं, और फ्रस्ट्रेशन की अब इसके बाद क्या?
हाँ,
इसका आंसर कहाँ से
इसका
मिलेगा?
आंसर तो यही होगा ना जो महाभारत कह रहे हैं कि आपको एनलाइटेंड सेल्फ इंटरेस्ट, कि अगर आप खुद ही जोड़ के सब कुछ रख लेंगे तो आपके खिलाफ बगावत ज़रूर होगी, लेकिन अगर आप कुछ हर चीज़ बांट के लेंगे तो बगावत नहीं होगी, क्योंकि फिर हर एक आदमी जो है वो आपको तृष्णा से या आपको हेट से, बुरी नज़र से नहीं देखेगा। वो जानता है कि मेरा भी स्थान है और आपका भी स्थान है।
तो क्या ऐसा संभव है, ऐसा अवस्था, ऐसा स्थिति आने में?
आती है ना। ये जितने आपके ये आपके सोशल सिक्योरिटी प्रोग्राम्स होते हैं, या आपके अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट प्रोग्राम्स होते हैं, या आपके जैसे जहाँ मेडिकल इंश्योरेंस भी होती है लेकिन की प्रथा होती है, आप कहते हैं नहीं, कोई भी आदमी कैजुअल्टी में जाएगा उसको मेडिकल केयर मिलनी चाहिए। ये सारी चीज़ें इसीलिए तो हैं कि आपको ऐसा नहीं है कि बिल्कुल ही आपको डिनाई कर दिया जाए। अब ये सोसाइटी की, देखिए सोसाइटी में दो चीज़ें होती हैं, इंडिविजुअल वेल्थ एंड सोसाइटल वेल्थ। जब तक खाली इंडिविजुअल वेल्थ बढ़ेगी तो खाई बढ़ती रहेगी। जब सोसाइटल वेल्थ भी बढ़ेगी तो आप देखेंगे कि शायद इंडिविजुअल वेल्थ कम हो जाएगी, सोसाइटल वेल्थ ज़्यादा हो जाएगी। इसीलिए हिंदुस्तान में इतने सारे मिलियनर्स और बिलियनर्स हैं और लोग इतनी गरीबी है। अगर लेकिन सोसाइटल वेल्थ बढ़ जाएगी तो शायद बिलियनर्स कम हो जाएंगे और गरीबी भी कम हो जाएगी।
इसलिए गांधी जी का जो कहा है कि वी हैव एनफ रिसोर्सेज फॉर एवरीवन नीड्स, बट
ग्रीड तो इम्पॉसिबल है ना।
है इम्पॉसिबल।
हाँ,
So
एग्जैक्टली।
we have to keep in that in the minds.
कीप दैट इन माइंड, एब्सोल्युटली।
Only then we can achieve
हाँ,
something.
एब्सोल्युटली।
So, well, friend, today we try to discuss the Queens of Mahabharat, but it was just as I told you in the beginning that it was introductory lecture, and we will discuss if Dr. Kavita Sharma allow us to schedule her lecture in the next month. So we will discuss each of the character, how they had their strengths and weaknesses. We will talk all about that, so that the dilemma which is created in all of us listening this lecture, that will also get sorted out. So with this hope, I hope she will allow us to schedule. With these words, we'll like to wind up the lecture today, and I thank all of you for watching the lecture. And on your behalf, I thank Dr. Kavita Sharma for giving such a wonderful lecture. Thank you very much.